My wife cheated with her boss, and now he's claiming half of our $500, $0 estate in court. After I found out she secretly transferred our property into his name during our divorce settlement, I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife turned out to be a complete nightmare. Honestly, I thought we had a good life. 2 kids, a nice house, decent jobs. But everything changed the day I found out she was cheating on me with her boss, Mark. And what's worse, she's trying to steal half of our $500, $0 estate now, claiming she deserves it because she contributed to everything. Yeah, right. It all started about 6 months ago. Had been acting weird, secretive texts, late nights at the office, brushing off my questions. I chalked it up to work stress or her being busy with her new promotion. She's always been a bit of a bitch about her career, so I never pressed her too hard, but I could tell something was off. She'd snap at me over small things, dismiss my concerns, and suddenly she started wearing more makeup, doing her hair differently, dressing up for work dinners that she insisted were just business meetings. Yeah, I should seen the warning signs then, but I didn't want to believe it. One day I was at home just minding my own business when I noticed her phone buzzing constantly. I peeked at her lock screen, something I normally wouldn't do, but I was curious. There was a string of messages from Mark, just casual at first, but then it turned more personal. Flirty comments, "Can't wait to see you tonight," and "You're the only one I think about." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My first instinct was to confront her, but I held back. I needed more evidence. A few days later, I decided to check her emails. I know, invasion of privacy, but I was desperate. And what I found was worse than I imagined. There were detailed plans about meeting up, secret hotel reservations, even pictures of her in lingerie. But what really made my blood boil was an email from her boss, Mark, talking about transferring some property into his name as part of a deal they'd worked out during our divorce settlement. I couldn't believe my eyes. She'd been secretly transferring our assets, our house, our savings into Mark's name. That night I waited until she was asleep, then I printed out everything I could find. I had to be sure. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about betrayal on a whole different level. She was planning to steal our future, and I was just starting to realize how deep her lies went. I didn't sleep that night. My stomach was in knots, and I kept asking myself how she could do this to me, to us. The next morning I confronted her. I showed her the emails, the texts, the proof I'd gathered. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. She everything at first said I was paranoid, that Mark was just a business acquaintance, that I was reading too much into it. But I didn't buy her bullshit. I knew she was lying. She started crying, saying she was sorry, that she'd made a mistake, that it was just sex, and that Mark was just helping her get ahead at work. She insisted she loved me, that none of this mattered, that I was overreacting. But I saw through her lies. I could see how her eyes darted around, how she kept trying to change the subject, how her voice cracked when she said she loved me. It was all a show. I felt numb, honestly. All of my trust, my respect for her just evaporated in that moment. I didn't know if I should scream, cry, or just walk away. Instead, I sat there, listening to her try to spin her story, knowing deep down that everything was falling apart. That day marked the beginning of the end. I knew I couldn't stay married to someone who would do this to me, to our family. But I also knew I had to plan my next move carefully. Because if she was willing to transfer property into Mark's name during our divorce, what else was she capable of? I was angry, hurt, and confused all at once. The worst part, I still loved her, or at least I thought I did. Now I wasn't sure what love even meant anymore. After that confrontation, everything changed. I couldn't look at the same way. She kept crying, begging me to believe her, to give her another chance, but I was done. The trust was shattered beyond repair. Still, I knew I had to be smart about this. She was a manipulative woman, and I had to cover my bases. I started digging deeper into her finances, her phone, her emails, anything that could give me more insight into what she was up to. Turns out, she'd been funneling money into secret accounts, probably with Mark's help. I found transfer records and bank statements that showed a significant amount of our savings had disappeared. I was furious. How could she do this? We worked hard for that money, and she was planning to steal it all with her boss. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. I decided I needed legal help. I contacted a lawyer who specializes in divorce and asset protection. I wanted to make sure I could prevent her from transferring anything else, especially the house and the estate. The lawyer told me that had already transferred our property into Mark's name during the divorce proceedings. She'd done it secretly, probably with forged signatures or some underhanded tricks. That's when I realized how far gone she was. She didn't just cheat on me. She was actively trying to rob me of everything we had built. Meanwhile, kept up her act, pretending to be remorseful, crying about how she loved me and how she'd do anything to fix things. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I could see her true colors, bitchy, manipulative, greedy. She lied about everything, even claiming she'd been forced into doing all this because Mark made her feel special. Yeah, right. Mark was just a leech and she was a liar. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her get away with it. I started gathering evidence to prove her intent to defraud me, including texts, emails, bank records, and witness statements from people who knew about her affair and her plans. I also hired a private investigator to follow her around, just to confirm her whereabouts during her secret meetings. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. It was like watching someone steal my life piece by piece. One night, I caught her sneaking out of the house after I had gone to bed. She was heading to some hotel downtown, probably to meet Mark again. That was the last straw. I knew I had to confront her one more time, but this time with everything on the table. I wanted her to know I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I wanted to put an end to her lies, her schemes, her manipulations. I waited until she left, then I went through her phone, her emails, everything I could find. It was a mess, proof of her affair, her plans to transfer more assets, her lies about the work dinners. I printed everything and kept it in a safe place. I was ready. I knew I needed to act fast and decisively if I wanted to save what was left of my dignity and my estate. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. We discussed the best way to freeze her assets, prevent her from transferring anything else, and prepare for the inevitable court battle. I also drafted a temporary restraining order to keep her from selling or transferring any more property. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I finally had some leverage, and dread because I knew this was just the beginning of a long, painful fight. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was to think everything was perfect. Was always bitchy, yes, but I thought that was just her personality. I never imagined she'd betray me this way, secretly plotting to steal our future. The betrayal hit hard, but I also learned a lot about trust, manipulation, and what it takes to stand up for myself. I'm still in the thick of it, but I know I won't let her ruin me without a fight. The legal process moved faster than I expected once I had everything in order. I had the evidence, the testimonies, and my lawyer's advice. We filed for a court injunction to freeze all property transfers, and I requested an emergency hearing to prevent from transferring any more assets. I knew she was desperate to get rid of the evidence, to hide what she'd done, but I was determined not to let her pull any more tricks. During the court hearing, her attitude was icy. She sat there, bitchy as ever, trying to spin her lies. She claimed I was overreacting, that everything was just a misunderstanding, that Mark was just a friend helping her with her career. She even had the nerve to cry again, acting like the victim. But the judge wasn't buying it. My lawyer presented the evidence, emails, bank records, witness statements, and it was clear she'd been planning this for months. The judge granted the temporary restraining order. She also ordered an audit of all our accounts and assets, which confirmed what I already knew, had transferred our house, our savings, and other investments into Mark's name. It was a shock, but I felt a strange sense of relief. Now I knew the extent of her betrayal and I could fight back legally. That's when I discovered she'd already transferred some of our estate into Mark's name during the divorce settlement. She'd done it secretly, probably forging signatures or using some shady loophole. The estate, worth about $500, was at risk of being lost forever if I didn't act fast. I couldn't believe she'd go this far. She'd lied, cheated, and now she was trying to steal what was rightfully mine. I started working closely with my lawyer to prepare for the court battle. We filed for full disclosure of all assets, and I also initiated a forensic investigation into her financial records. Meanwhile, kept up her bitchy attitude. She'd call me paranoid, accuse me of trying to ruin her, and insist she still loved me, but I saw through her. I knew she was just trying to manipulate me into backing down. One night, I caught her trying to access some of our bank accounts again. She was acting nervous, fidgety, like she was trying to hide something. I confronted her then and told her I had enough. If she kept trying to hide or transfer assets, I'd go to court and ask for full control of everything. Her face twisted with anger and she snapped at me, accusing me of being obsessed, of trying to ruin her. But I didn't care anymore. I was done playing her game. At this point, I'd also started documenting her behavior, taking screenshots, saving emails, recording her calls when I could. I knew she was reckless, and I wanted to have everything on record. I realized that this wasn't just about money. This was about her betrayal, her greed, and her willingness to destroy our family for her own selfish gain. The emotional toll was heavy, but I knew I had to stay focused. My biggest concern now was the estate. I couldn't let her walk away with half of what we had worked so hard for. I had to find a way to prove she'd secretly transferred assets into Mark's name during our divorce negotiations. That's when I uncovered an email from her, a draft she'd never sent, where she discussed dividing assets discreetly with Mark. It confirmed everything. She planned this from the start. The next step was to prepare for the actual court hearing. I was nervous. This was the moment I'd fight for what was mine. I knew would do everything she could to lie her way out of it, but I had the evidence. I was ready. Deep down, I felt a mixture of anger, determination, and heartbreak. I never imagined my life would turn into this chaos, but I was determined not to let her get away with it. Not this time. The court date arrived sooner than I expected, and I was a mess of nerves and rage. Showed up looking even bitchier than usual, trying to put on that innocent act, but I saw right through her. She was trying to act like everything was fine, like she hadn't been caught red-handed. Her lawyer was whispering in her ear, probably telling her what to say next, but I had all the evidence ready. I also brought the witness statements and the forensic reports confirming her attempts to hide and transfer assets. When the judge called the case, I laid out everything: the emails, the bank transfer records, the forged signatures, the draft email discussing asset division. I explained how I'd secretly transferred our house, our savings, and other investments into Mark's name during the divorce negotiations. I showed her the evidence that proved she'd been planning this for months. Her lawyer tried to argue that I was overreacting, that was just trying to protect her interests, but the judge wasn't buying it. The judge looked directly at and asked her if she had anything to say. With that bitchy smirk, tried to deny everything. She said she loved me, that she'd never do anything to hurt our family, and that Mark was just a business acquaintance. She even had the nerve to claim she was coerced into doing this, which was laughable. I could see her eyes darting around, trying to come up with a believable lie, but the evidence was overwhelming. After a long debate, the judge ordered an immediate freeze on all remaining assets, including the property and bank accounts. She also mandated a full forensic audit of all our financial dealings, and she appointed an independent receiver to oversee the estate until the case was resolved. That was a huge win for me, but I knew the fight wasn't over yet. Was already scheming, I could tell. She'd try to find a way to wiggle out of it. As I left the courthouse, I felt a strange mixture of relief and rage. For the first time in months, I could breathe a little easier, knowing that the court recognized the fraud and that I had a fighting chance to keep what's mine. But at the same time, I was furious. Furious at her betrayal, furious at how she'd lied, manipulated, and schemed to steal from us. I couldn't believe the woman I'd loved for so many years had turned into this scheming, greedy bitch. Over the next few days, I worked with my lawyer to draft a detailed complaint to recover the estate and to hold accountable for her actions. I also started the process of filing for divorce, knowing I couldn't stay married to someone capable of this kind of treachery. Every step felt like a small victory, but the emotional scars ran deep. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I let someone I loved so much betray me so thoroughly. Meanwhile, was still trying to pull her usual manipulations. She called me, crying, begging for another chance, saying she was sorry and that she'd do anything to fix this. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I was done, that I was going to fight for my rights and protect what was left of our family. She yelled, called me a jealous, paranoid idiot. I just hung up and knew I had to keep my guard up. She was dangerous, and I couldn't let her ruin me completely. That's when I realized how much trust I'd lost, not just in her, but in the idea that I could ever truly believe in someone again. The woman I thought I knew was gone. What remains now is just a shell of the person I used to be, fighting to hold onto what's left of my life. I don't know how this ends, but I do know one thing. I let her walk away with half of everything we built, not without a fight. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles, sleepless nights, and a flood of emotions I couldn't quite process. Every day seemed to bring a new revelation. A new way tried to manipulate her way out of the mess she'd created. She was still trying to spin her lies, claiming she was forced into the transfers, that Mark was just a friend helping her get ahead, and that I was paranoid for doubting her. But I had the proof, more than enough to bury her lies. My lawyer pushed forward with the case, filing motions to recover the assets she'd secretly transferred and to hold her accountable for fraud. I also hired a forensic accountant to trace every dollar she'd moved, and the evidence was damning. It turned out she'd been funneling money into a series of offshore accounts, probably trying to hide her tracks. I knew she was desperate now, trying to cover her tracks before I could get full control of the estate. One day snapped. She showed up at my house unexpectedly, bitchy as ever, trying to guilt-trip me into dropping everything. She sat there crying, saying she loved me, that she'd do anything to make it right. She even threw in a few tears about how she was sorry for betraying me, and all she ever wanted was to be loved. I looked at her and saw right through her act. She was manipulative, selfish, and dangerous. I told her to get out, that I was done listening to her lies, but she didn't leave peacefully. No, she started screaming, throwing accusations that I was trying to ruin her life, that I was being paranoid, and that I was just jealous of her success with Mark. She even claimed I was trying to keep her from her true happiness. That was the moment I realized I couldn't trust her anymore. She was trying to turn the tables, make me look like the villain when she was the one who'd betrayed everything we had. I decided I needed to take more control. I filed for a restraining order, citing her harassment and attempts to manipulate the situation. The judge granted it, and she was ordered to stay away from me and the house. That was a relief, but I knew she'd find another way to interfere. She always did. I also started documenting every interaction, every lie, every attempt she made to manipulate the court or the process. I knew I had to be prepared for her next move. The most frustrating part was seeing how she kept lying, spinning her web of deceit, all while trying to portray herself as the victim. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. I thought I knew her, loved her, trusted her. But it was all a lie. Deep down, I felt betrayed, broken, and furious. I had loved this woman, built a life with her, and now I was fighting just to keep what was mine. Meanwhile, Mark was nowhere to be seen. I suspected he was laying low, trying to avoid the fallout, but I knew his days of hiding were numbered. The evidence against him was piling up too. The court was closing in, and I was determined to see this through. I wanted my estate back, I wanted justice, and most of all, I wanted to be free from her manipulations. Every day now feels like a battle. I wake up thinking about everything I've lost: trust, security, peace. But I also wake up with a fierce determination. This isn't over yet. I'm going to fight for what's mine: my house, my savings, my dignity. Lies won't get her anywhere. I'm tired of playing nice, tired of being the victim. It's time to take control and end this nightmare once and for all. The final court hearing was a few weeks after everything else. I'd spent countless nights preparing, going over every piece of evidence, making sure every detail was crystal clear. His lawyer tried every trick in the book: denials, accusations, even some emotional appeals, but it was all falling apart under the weight of the undeniable proof I had. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation, and I knew that this was the moment I'd finally get some closure. When the judge called the case, I stood up, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and relief. I laid out the entire story, how I'd secretly transferred our assets into Mark's name during the divorce, how she'd been lying and manipulating from the start, and how she tried to cover her tracks with offshore accounts and forged signatures. I presented the forensic reports, the witness statements, the emails, everything. And I saw her squirm, her bitchy mask cracking just a little. The judge listened carefully, then made her decision. She ordered to return all assets transferred illegally, to pay restitution for the money she'd stolen, and to be held accountable for her fraud. She also granted me full control over the estate, including the house, the savings, and the investments. The relief was overwhelming. For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally getting justice. Face was a mixture of rage and disbelief. She tried to argue, to manipulate her way out of it, but the judge wasn't having any of her nonsense. She warned her that continued deception would only worsen her legal situation. As was ordered out of the courtroom, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of victory, like I'd finally taken back what was rightfully mine. The aftermath was a whirlwind. I filed the final divorce papers, making sure she couldn't manipulate or drag me back into her web. I also took steps to secure my assets, changing locks, updating account access, and consulting with financial advisors to rebuild my savings. It was a long, painful process, but I was determined to move forward. The betrayal had gutted me, but I refused to let her destroy my future completely. Looking back, I realize I learned some harsh truths. Trust is fragile, and sometimes people you love can turn into complete strangers. The betrayal hurt worse than I ever thought possible, but it also made me stronger. I learned to be more cautious, more guarded, and to value myself enough to fight for what's mine. I don't regret standing up for myself, even if it cost me the woman I once loved. Now I'm rebuilding my life. The house is quiet, the kids are with me, and I have a clearer sense of what's important is out of the picture, and I'm finally free from her manipulations. It's not the ending I thought I'd ever have, but it's mine. And I know one thing for sure, I'll never let anyone betray me like that again. Trust is earned, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take advantage of me or my family ever again.